I teach biology, and there are a couple of things I need in order to be able to treat a subject as a science, and not simply an opinion or a recital of data. What I need is, first of all, a mechanism. If a student asks how the beaks of Darwin's finches, for instance, evolved, I need an explanation with some predictive power. I need to be able to talk about things like drift, natural selection, all these phenomena that have been thoroughly documented in the scientific literature. Or, of course, if intelligent designers provided some other alternative, we could teach that, but they haven't so far. In addition to having a mechanism that I can get a handle on, that I can use to explain the concept in the classroom, I need evidence. I can't merely say that finches' beaks change size because a theory says they change. That's not science either. I need observations, measurements, experiments that show that the observed mechanism works. So everything in the science classroom should revolve around those two classes of information. The mechanism or theory, which provides a conceptual framework to understand the data, and it makes sense of the data. Without it, it's as pointless as memorizing statistics off of baseball cards without knowing the rules of baseball. So we need theory. And of course, the other piece is the data. Are there real-world observations that can be plugged into that theory? Can we make predictions? Can we test the theory? In many cases, we can do experiments in the classroom laboratory that test pieces of the theory, or we can go to the scientific literature and find thoroughly documented instances of these kinds of experiments and observations and use those in the classroom. So what about intelligent design? It turns out it has neither of those things, neither a mechanism nor any data behind it. There is no theory of ID. Simply stating that you think a designer did it is not sufficient. The question you need to answer for it to be a scientific issue is, how did the designer do it? You've got to provide that specific mechanism that we can use as a framework to look for evidence of the designer's actions. This is a major strike against making intelligent design a part of the curriculum. What exactly should we teach? Like I say, you can't just say a designer did it. That is inadequate. It gives us nothing to go on further. And furthermore, the creationists know this. I have to quote this particular comment that all the evolutionists love. All right, it's a great comment. It's from Paul Nelson. He made it in 2004 in a magazine called Touchstone, a journal of mere Christianity. And he's talking about the problems of intelligent design. And here's what he said. Easily, the biggest challenge facing the intelligent design community is to develop a full-fledged theory of biological design. We don't have such a theory now. I emphasize that. We do not have such a theory. And that's a real problem. Without a theory, it's hard to know where to direct your research focus. Right now, we've got a bag of powerful intuitions and a handful of notions such as irreducible complexity and specified complexity, but as yet, no general theory of biological design. That's a pretty serious problem. If you're going to be telling us we ought to be teaching this in the classroom and you're going to admit up front that you don't have a theory to teach, what are we supposed to do? And without a theory, how do we know where to direct your research focus? That's how Nelson put it. And that's an intelligent and appropriate thing to say. You need the theory to know where to look for the evidence supporting your ideas. How do you get data to support your positive claims? And that's the other part of those two key components I mentioned. Remember, we need theory or mechanism, we need data. If you don't know where to look for the data, you're not going to be able to fill in that part either. Basically, what we demand is something more than a designer did it. We need a more detailed explanation of how the designer did it, which would suggest what kind of tool marks his actions would lead. Then we need a collection of data that shows those unique tool marks. And that word is important, unique. It has to be something that distinguishes it from a more natural theory of evolution that also proposes change over time, but doesn't impose the requirement that we have an intelligent designer do it. We need something that shows specifically that an intelligent designer did it. We don't have that data. At best, there are unconvincing attempts to claim that complexity is such a mark. Unfortunately, evolutionary biology generates complexity all over the place. So simply saying it was too complex, it must have evolved, or it must have been designed, is a fallacy. Evolution generates lots and lots of complexity in its normal operation. So put yourself in the place of the poor teacher asked to teach intelligent design. After announcing that some people think an intelligent agent created at least some kinds of life on Earth, what do you do next? I'm at a loss. There doesn't seem to be anything you can do next. There are no experiments that you can carry out in the classroom. There are no published papers that publish documented, reasonable pieces of evidence in support of the idea. There's nothing there. For instance, can you say anything about the nature of the designer? Now, in the case of evolution, we can say quite a bit about the nature of the processes involved. We can talk about mutation, we can talk about drift, we can talk about natural selection. And we can show experiments that show that these things exist, that actually do something. And we can show many instances where they've shaped populations. We get nothing like that from the intelligent design crowd. In fact, they are such intellectual cowards that they run away from any attempt to pin them down on exactly what they're talking about. A perfect example is to ask them a really simple question. A simple question to a scientist is you ask them, how old is the Earth and how do you know it? And what you discover in the scientific community is uniform, simple answers. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. We can use things like radiometric dating, using a number of different methods of radiometric dating. We can use astronomical information. We can use all kinds of data to show that it has to be that old. If you talk to the Discovery Institute, they are dedicated to this thing called the Big Tent, which means they are going to allow young Earth intelligent or young Earth creationists, old Earth creationists, intelligent design creationists, Christians, Muslims, everything in their Big Tent. And so they therefore refuse to answer the question. There is no firm answer from the creationists at the Discovery Institute on how old the Earth is. They permit answers to range from anywhere from about 5,000 years to over 5 billion years, which is a million-fold range. Those are pretty big error bars on what they expect. Now, what happens is that when you confront intelligent design creationists with these simple facts, ask them, okay, well, tell me, what are you going to teach in the classroom? They will stumble a bit. They can't present a theory, they can't present data, so what are they going to do instead? Well, they're going to do what I predict Dr. Bergman will do, and he's already done a bit of, and that is, let's complain about evolution. Let's find things to argue over in evolutionary theory. But I'll remind you that that's not part of the process of teaching a positive idea about science. You don't just carp about the opposition. You have to propose something. We need a theory of intelligent design. We need data in order for it to be taught. Now, there have been a couple of examples where people have tried to make the case that it should be taught in the classroom. And one I'll mention is that in 2002 in Ohio, they tried to ram a couple of things through in their science standards and get the teachers to be forced to teach about creationism. And one of the things they did is they put together an intelligent design lesson plan. Now that's a good start. That's what we want. If you're going to be teaching, you want a lesson plan. You want to know, what are the points I should be making? And as I've already told you, you should be making a point. What is this theory? What is this theory of intelligent design? What is the data, the evidence, the experiments? Unfortunately, when you look at this critical analysis of evolution, is what they called it, there's nothing like that. Again, it's more complaining about evolutionary biology. For instance, one of the key points in there is, have students consider aspects of evolutionary biology that are critically analyzed by scientists, such as Hox genes, biogeography, vestigial organs, four-winged fruit flies, finches. These are all good evidence for evolution. What are you going to criticize about them? What are you going to bring up as an alternative? For instance, if you're going to talk about vestigial organs like the appendix, what's your explanation for the appendix then? Give me one. Evolutionary biologists have a pretty good one. It's a relic organ. It's a remnant of a larger organ that was much more significant in earlier stages of evolution. The intelligent design creationists can't do that. So ultimately what we're down to is where's the theory of ID, where's the evidence, and they can't give it to us, and that's why it shouldn't be taught in the classroom. So remember this, to teach a scientific idea, you must provide a mechanism or theory and a body of observations and experiments to support it. And when asked to do this, in every case, the ideists are reduced to reciting often discredited gripes about evolution, and that's not what we need for a science class. That doesn't work. How much time do we have? Oh, good, okay. There's another dimension of this issue as well, and that is that teaching is not a playground for teachers to spout off about whatever strikes their fancy. It is a position of responsibility. Teachers are legally and ethically obligated to teach a curriculum defined at the state and district levels. They have an obligation to their colleagues because at the same time they're teaching this biology course that discusses evolution, the students may be taking other courses that will depend on the information coming out of yours. In subsequent years of their coursework, they may take courses that follow on your course, and if you haven't presented the evidence that your colleagues expect that the students will have covered, you've made extra work for your friends. So that's not a good thing. And of course, the most important reason is that we're responsible to the students. We must give them accurate and appropriate information so they can make informed decisions as a citizen or have a good foundation for their future careers. Now, it doesn't matter whether you personally believe in creationism or not. That shouldn't be an issue here. The problem is that teaching creationism is a violation of professional responsibility. It flouts the requirements of the state-mandated science standards, and it may conflict with the goals of the local curriculum. And that curriculum is usually designed to instruct students over the course of multiple classes. Now, I know for a fact that students who have had their time wasted with misconceived creationist notions in the classroom, who are